Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopinjanavallabha Girivardhari Gopinjanavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Jamnatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Bhajajanarandana Yashodanandana Jai. Hari.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhatresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate Dharmajnanadibhisaha Kalau Nashtadrishamesha Puranarko Dhunoditaha. This is Grantaraj Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 6, entitled Conversation between Narad and Vyasdev. And today we'll do text number 12 and 13, because there's a purport on text 13. Chitradhatu vichitradrin Eva bhagna bhujabdruman Jalashayan chivajalan Nalini surasevitaha Chitrasvane patrarathair Vibramad brahmarashriyah. Chitradhatu vichitradrin Eva bhagna evadrum Jalashayan chivajalan Nalini surasevitaha Chitrasvanai patrarathair Vibramad brahmarashriyah.
Chitradhatu vichitradrin Iva bhagna bhujadruman Jalashaya chivajalan Nalini surasevitaha Chitrasvanai patrarathair Vibramad brahmarashriyah. Chitradhatu vichitradrin Iva bhagna bhujadruman Jalashayan chivajalan
Nalini Nalini Surasevitaha
Chitrasvana Patravatar
Chitrasvanaihi Patrathair
Vibramad Brahmarashriyaha
Vibramad Brahmarashriyah
Chitradatu Vichitradrin
Chitradatu Vichitradrin
Bhagna Bhujadruman
Vibhavna Bhujadruman
Jalasayan Chivajalan
Jalashayan Shivajalan
Nalini Surasevitaha
Nalini Surasevitaha
Chitrasvane Patrarate
Chitrasvanai Patrarathai
Vibrama Brahmanashriya
Vibrama Brahmarashriyaha
Chitra
Chitra
Dhatu
Dhatu
valuable minerals like gold, silver, and copper.
Valuable minerals like gold, silver, and copper.
Vichitra
Vichitra
full of variegatedness. Adrin hills and mountains. Ibabhagna
Vibhavna
broken by the giant elephants.
broken by giant elephants.
Bhuja
The
branches.
branches.
Draman
Druman
trees.
trees.
Jalashayan
Jalashaya
Shiva
Shiva
health giving.
health giving.
Jalan
Jalan
reservoirs of water.
reservoirs of water.
Nalini
Nalini
lotus flowers.
lotus flowers.
Surasevitaha
Surasevitaha
aspired to by the denizens of heaven.
inspired to by the denizens of heaven.
Chitrasvanaihi
Chitrasvanai
pleasing to the heart.
pleasing to the heart.
Patrarathaihi
Patrarathai
by the
by
birds.
the birds.
Vibhramat
Vibhamat
bewildering.
bewildering.
Brahmarashriyaha
Brahmarashriyaha
decorated by drones.
decorated by drones.
This is in the days when drones were not lethal weapons. Translation: I passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs of various minerals like gold, silver, and copper, and through tracts of land with reservoirs reservoirs of water filled with beautiful lotus flowers, fit for the denizens of heaven, decorated with bewildered bees and singing birds. There's no purport here. We'll go on to the next verse. Nalavenu sharastanba
Nalavenu sarastamba
kushaki chakagahwaram
Gatvaram
eka evati yatoham
Ekaevati yatoham
adraksham vipinam mahat
Adraksham vipinam mahat
ghoram pratibhayakaram
Ghoram pratibhayakaram
vyaloluka shivajiram
Vyaloluka
shivajiram Nala
Nala
pipes
pipes
Venu
Venu
bamboo
Bamboo
Shara
Shara
pens.
Seven
Now these pipes and pens are not the ones that you smoke with or write with. Nala means a reed, cane. In that sense it's a pipe. Venu's bamboo. Shara means, actually Shara means arrow. Srila Prabhupada says pens here. It means a sharp kinds of weeds and plants and things. Tanba,
Tanda
full of.
Love
Kusha,
Shira
sharp grass.
Shara
Kichaka,
Ichaka
weeds.
Weeds
Gahwaram,
Dagwaram
caves.
Caves
Ekaha,
Ekaha
alone.
Alone
Eva,
Eva
only. Atiyataha, difficult to go through. Aham, I. Adraksham,
Adraksham
visited.
Visited
Vipinam,
Vinam
deep forests.
Forest
Mahat,
Mahat
great. Ghoram,
Ghoram
fearful. Pratibhayakaram, dangerously. Vyala, snakes. Ulukua, owls. Shiva, jackals.
Jackals
Ajiram, playgrounds. Translation: I then passed alone through many forests of rushes, bamboo, reeds, sharp grass, weeds, and caves. which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. Purport. It is the duty of a mendicant Parivrajagacharya to experience all varieties of God's creation by traveling alone through all forests, hills, towns, villages, etc., to gain faith in God and strength of mind, as well as to enlighten the inhabitants with the message of God. A sannyasi is duty-bound to take all these risks without fear, and the most typical sannyasi of the present age is Lord Chaitanya, who traveled in the same manner through the central Indian jungles, enlightening even the tigers, bears, snakes, deer, elephants, and many other jungle animals. In this age of Kali, sannyas is forbidden for ordinary men. One who changes his dress to make propaganda is a different man from the original ideal sannyasi. One should, however, take the vow to stop social intercourse completely and devote life exclusively to the service of the Lord. The change of dress is only a formality. Lord Chaitanya did not accept the name of a sannyasi, and in this age of Kali, the so-called sannyasis should not change their former names, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. In this age, devotional service of hearing and repeating the holy glories of the Lord is strongly recommended, and one who takes the vow of renunciation of family life need not imitate the Parivrajagacharya like Nadid or Lord Chaitanya, but may sit down at some holy place and devote his whole time and energy to hear and repeatedly chant the holy scriptures left by the great acharyas like the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Om Jnanatimirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. These two verses are juxtapositioned with one another. Why is that? Srila Prabhupada doesn't comment until text 13, but his comments, his purport, is relevant to both text 12 and 13. Why is that?
About two different scenarios.
Very different scenarios. The first one is absolutely heavenly. Chitra Dhatu, and Sridhar Swami, and therefore Srila Prabhupada, says that he's passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs like various minerals like gold, silver, and copper. Chitra means wonderful, and Vichitra means extremely awesome. fantastic, magnificent. Just like people go to places like Yosemite National Park in California. Big, big mountains. They're not even gold mountains, but it's enough to intoxicate people. They're fascinated. And especially if you're from India, you will definitely not miss Niagara Falls. I think there's not a single NRI in this country that I've met who has not gone to Niagara Falls. Okay. Yeah, but you're already in saffron, so you don't count. So these are magnificent things. Vichitra, the word is used here. He says, Vichitradrin, magnificent mountains. Why magnificent? Because they're made of gold. Obviously, that would be very attractive. Remember, Narad Muni is wandering throughout the three worlds. He's not restricted to America. He's got a visa to go anywhere he wants. And so he's doing like that. We can imagine this would be maybe in the heavenly planets. So what else is there? Ibha bhagna bhuja druman. Druma. Druma, just like kalpa druma. What is a kalpa druma? Yeah. If you determine yourself, when you touch the base of this tree, the tree can give you anything you want. Kalpa druma, also called kalpa vriksha. Druma means tree. So what is the significance of these trees? Ibha bhagna bhuja. Bhuja means? Chatur bhuja? Anybody heard? Arms. So what are the arms of the trees? The branches. And what is the nature of these branches? Ibha bhagna. Bhagna means broken. Who broke them? Huh?
Giant elephants.
Ibhas. Ibhas is a not very often heard word for elephants. Big elephants, Prabhupada says, giant elephants. I saw this once when I was on Padayatra in South India. There was an elephant on the party. And for sport, sheer sport, no need whatsoever, just for play, this elephant would wrap its trunk around the tree and just pull out the whole tree and throw it to the side of the road. So, what kind of trees are these? According to, I think it's Vijayadhwaj Tirtha, he says these are Bhurja Vriksha. Bhurja. In Vrindavan we have Bhurja Road. What does Bhurja mean? Anybody know? Nobody will know this. This is a not very often used word. Bhurja means a birch tree.
A what tree?
Birch bark. Yeah. So they're pulling up birch trees and they're throwing them about for sport. And so Narad Muni is seeing these trees with broken branches. Then what next? Jalashayan Chivajalan. Jalashaya means a lake or a pond, reservoir. And Shiva Jala. What does Shiva Jala mean? Shiva's water. No.
Auspicious.
Yes, Shiva also means auspicious. Now, if you'll notice, those who are paying close attention, in text 13 we also have the word Shiva. What does it mean there? Look in the word for word. Jackals. Therefore, you have to be very careful with Sanskrit. If you can say Om Namaha Shivaya, your intention has to be clear.
Hare Krishna.
So, Shiva Jalan. Here he's translated it. I think, who else? Viragavacharya. Shivani Vishuddhani Jalani. These waters were exceedingly pure. Vishesh Shuddha. There's Shuddha means pure. Vishuddha means Vishesh pure. Very especially pure. Just like we buy, what kind of water do we buy? Poland spring water, right?
Yes, sir.
Why? Why not just ordinary bottled water?
It's even more pure.
Even more pure, what does that mean?
It's naturally occurring.
It's naturally occurring. And what is the advantage of being natural as opposed to being pure? Distilled water is also pure. Ah,
This is for health.
okay. This is the idea here. This is what we're referring to. These kinds of spring waters are very healthy waters, health-giving waters, Prabhupada says, or Vishuddha, very pure water. The difference between spring water and ordinary bottled water, distilled water, is that spring water has the prana still within it. Prana is flowing throughout this universe in all ways, particularly in three ways. It flows as the Soma, the moon, and it flows as What else? Agni, that would be the sun,
Rain.
and it flows as Vata or Vayu, the wind. These things convey the pranas that are permeating this world. And we can pull in the prana to our system through these various means. So water is also there. It's infused with prana, but only if it's flowing water. Once you dam water, or once you distill water and do other things to tweak it, then it loses this prana. So then it's no longer Shiva Jala. The word is used. And then finally, Nalini Sura Sevitaha. Nalini means Nalini. Sometimes people have this name. Yes, lotus flower. Beautiful lotus flowers.
It's the name of Lakshmi.
Yes, Nalini is also called. Why? Because she's born. Yeah, and she another name, Kamala, Padma. Any name for lotus is automatically a name for Lakshmi. So this is the opulence. Actually, Lakshmi means this kind of beauty, natural beauty and opulence. Clean water, that is real wealth. Pure foods to eat, that is real wealth. Fertile lands to farm, that is wealth. Just because you have so many credits in the bank, it's not even really gold anymore. It's just neither is it even paper. It's just credit. You have this in the bank, people think you're very wealthy, but this is real wealth. So it looks like he's in the heavenly planets. Chitra swanehi. The sounds are very pleasing or wonderful. Who's making those sounds? Not yet.
The bird. Yeah?
Patra ratha. Patra ratha. What does patra mean? Patram pushpam phalam.
Leaves.
Leaf. So patra ratha. Somebody whose cart is a leaf. Does that make sense?
Somebody who's what is it?
Somebody whose car is a leaf.
Chariot. Yeah, leaf.
This is poetry language. It's hard to get this. Patra means the wings of the birds. They're shaped like leaves, no? Just like we say the ears of the cows are also shaped like leaves.
Right.
So, patra ratha, they're going by their leaves. They flap their wings. This is how they move. Patra ratha. So they're making wonderful noises. And vibhramad bhramarashriyaha. And the bees, what is the characteristic of these bees? Vibhrama. They're bewildered.
Yeah.
Why are they bewildered?
Intoxicated.
Because they're intoxicated by so much nectar.
Nectar.
Or even the smell of some of these things is very much intoxicating if you're a bee. They have in South India, at least in Tamil Nadu, they have this jawadhu.
Yeah.
Jawadhu. And it's a little powder that comes from the inside of the lotus flower. It's exceedingly fragrant. Very, very. So this kind of thing can drive you nuts if you're a bee. Therefore it said Brahmara Shriya. This is the Shriya means?
Well,
Yes, the opulence. This is how Lakshmi is manifest. Actually, Lakshmi Devi, we should not underestimate her position, because if we underestimate the position of Lakshmi Devi, then we also underestimate the position of Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani is called Jaya Shri. Why is Srimati Radharani called Jaya Shri?
which is the source of Shri.
Good guess. Jaya Shri. What does Jaya mean? So she conquers even Shri.
Hare Krishna.
And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, how does Srimati Radharani conquer Lakshmi Devi? When Lakshmi Devi came to Vrindavan to see her husband in his informal romantic form, she wanted to get into the Ras Leela, but she was unable to do so. Even though she was executing austerities, she was unable to do so. She could not join the Ras dance. That is Lakshmi's position, and actually she's still performing tapasya just across the river from Vrindavan. In which van? Anybody know? Straight across. Bilavavan. There's an old temple of Lakshmi Devi there, and it said that she's still, this is Gaudiya Vaishnava temple, mind you, she's still executing austerities with the intention of maybe joining someday Krishna's Ras Leela. But the Radharani is already in the Ras Leela, and Lakshmi Devi could not join the Ras Leela. Therefore she was defeated by Srimati Radharani. Therefore Radharani is called Jaya Shri. She who has conquered Shri, or the victorious form of Shri. So there's no Ras Leela without Srimati Radharani. Therefore, what does Madhvacharya say about Lakshmi? Srishti sthiti pralaya sarga maha vibhute vritti prakasha niyamavrita bandha mokshaha yasya apanga lava matrata urjita sa shrir yat kataksha balavati ajitam natosmi. On the face of it, he would seem to be offering his obeisances to Lord Vishnu, who is unconquered. But we know that Krishna is conquered. Hari is conquered by whom? By the sidelong glance of Lakshmi Devi. Lakshmi Devi, what is her sidelong glance? What is the power in the sidelong glance of Lakshmi Devi? Just by a mere glance, he says, the universe is created, all the universes are sustained, the universes are destroyed, secondary creation and destruction also goes on in the same way. Vritti, all of your occupations go on because of Lakshmi's glance only. Vritti. Prakasha, your enlightenment. Niyama, your discipline. Bandha, your bondage. Moksha, your liberation. All these things are affected only by the sidelong glance of Srimati Lakshmi Devi, and this Lakshmi is neglected by Krishna in favor of Srimati Radharani. Okay, so anyway, this is Vibhramad Brahmarashriya. Now, Narad Muni, not only does he have a nice time seeing these magnificent sights that even the denizens of heaven, Sura Sevita. Sura Sevita means they serve. You are what you serve. What do we do? Where our faith really is, that's where our service goes. So these demigods, they have faith in this natural beauty, and therefore they're taking on whatever service they have to do to enjoy these places. All right, now on the other hand, na lavenu sharastanba kushakichaka gahwaram eka evati yatoham adraksham vipanam mahata ghoram pratibhayakaram vyalo lukath shivajiram. He says, I then passed alone through many forests of rushes, bamboo, reeds, sharp grass, weeds, and caves, which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. Usually we're not so much afraid of owls and jackals. Why does he mention owls and jackals here?
They're nocturnal.
It's so dark.
Nocturnal animals.
Owls are considered to be inauspicious.
Yeah.
If you hear an owl making the noise that they make, it's considered to be inauspicious. Unless the owl is white, and in that case it's very auspicious because a white owl indicates, only Bengalis know this, Lakshmi.
Hey.
But the white owl is very rare. Okay, snakes, owls, and jackals are similarly inauspicious creatures, especially when they're all barking. Snakes, it's obvious. So, he was walking through these places. Shivajiram. Ajiram means the playground, according to, who said this? Sridhar Swami. Ajiram Kridasthanam, the playground of all these creatures. Vyala, Uluka, Shiva. And how does he characterize him? Pratibhayakaram, exceedingly fearsome. Why? Ghoram, it is terrible. Have we heard the word Ghora before?
Yeah.
Ghora. Yes, exactly. This is back in chapter 2, text number 26. We can just review very quickly. Narad Muni has already told us, or Vyasadeva has already told us. Mumukshavo ghora rupan hitva bhuta patinatha narayana kalaha shanta hajanti yanasuyavaha. Those persons who were not envious and peaceful, they worship the kalas of Lord Narayan, giving up the bhutapati. What does bhutapati? Bhutanath. Shiva. Or, in a more generic sense, you can say Bhutapati means the lords of anybody who is created, the lords of any living entity. Anyone who is a lord of a Bhuta. Bhuta means that which is created, creatures, the lord of creatures. So how are they depicted? Ghora, horrible, ghastly. And in his purport, Srila Prabhupada specifically mentions the separated parts and parcels of the Lord have different positions in the estimation of material powers, and some of them are like Kala Bhairava, Shmashana Bhairava, Shani, Mahakali, and Chandika. These demigods are worshipped mostly by those who are in the lowest categories of the mode of darkness or ignorance. So, generally we can say that things that are tamasic and things that are exceedingly rajasic in a sinful way, in an ugra way that is, these things are also called ghora, ugra karma, ugra rupa, like this. Okay, so now nala means pipes, bamboo, venu, shara, sharp reeds. Tanba, here we were talking about this yesterday. Srila Prabhupada gives the word here as tanba. I don't find this word in my dictionary, but tanva is a similar word, but even that word doesn't seem to fit the context. Srila Prabhupada says it means full of. Now, Sridhar Swami says something different. Sometimes the acharyas disagree. It's nothing really to get bent out of shape about, but it's from this example we can see why we discussed this yesterday. We only know how to break up words by the commentaries. So Sridhar Swami says it's not shara stanba, but instead it's shara stanba. Stanba is a different word. What does stanba mean? It means a clump of grass or a thicket. That makes sense also. So different ways to look at it. We don't even need to resolve what is the issue. Kusha, what is kusha grass? Those big bushes with the pointy things you've seen? That is kusha grass. They grow in swampy areas. Quite often. And they're considered very auspicious, so much so that in deity worship we should be using kusha grass mats, but the problem is that you can't find them anymore because it's Kali Yuga and nothing is auspicious. Therefore the kusha grass is disappearing, just like so many other species. Okay, so Kichaka, what does he say about this? According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, hollow bamboo, the kind of hollow bamboo like dry, light tan colored bamboo, clacking in the forest, this is Kichaka. So he has to make his way through that stuff. And who likes to hang out in bamboo groves? Vyala, snakes. They love bamboo. Also they like sandalwood. So Narad Muni is having to pick his way through all this stuff. There's no path we can imagine. That's what it means. Atiyata, here the word is used. Gahwaram, just like in, where? In Brajatam there's Gahwaravan. Anybody know where that is? Gahwaravan, dense forest, near Varshana. Famous place. But Gahwara here means, Prabhupada says, caves. Gahwara can also mean a cave. So the caves of Govardhan Hill and the forest, dense forests at Varshana, these are places where Radha Krishna repair to have their pastimes, confidential pastimes. But in Narad Muni's case, Evati yato aham eva eka. I'm going through this stuff alone and it's very difficult to cut through this stuff. Adraksham, here Prabhupada says he visited these places. Adraksham literally means he saw these places. What places? Vipinam mahata. Big forests. There's hardly any big forests in the world left. Now, we've cut them all down for development and for various industries. But Vipinam mahat. I remember once in the 1980s, I took a train from Orissa to Delhi. And we went through the Jharikanda forest. And for miles and miles and miles, there was no sound outside, and no road outside, no dwelling outside, only thick jungles. So at least in the 1980s, these places were there. I think nowadays they're inhabited by Maoists. But anyway, Narad Muni had to go through these things. Koram pratibhayakaram, very fearful things. And we've already described why. So, Srila Prabhupada in his purport What else does Koram? Koram means repulsive or fearsome. In his purport, Prabhupada writes, it is the duty of a mendicant, especially Parivrajagacharya, to experience all varieties of God's creation by traveling alone through all forests, hills, towns, villages, etc. For what purpose? Anybody remember what he said? Why is it the duty of a Parivrajagacharya to experience all varieties by traveling in all these different places, both good and bad, both pleasing and displeasing, like Nada Muni's done? Why? To gain faith in God. Why do you gain faith by wandering through very pleasing places and very hellish places? How do you gain faith that way?
You learn that you are very insignificant and
Okay, that's a good answer. Anything else?
You realize God is everywhere. And
You realize God is everywhere.
He's the one maintaining you throughout all of it.
Very good. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur sums up, he says, Man manaso bhagavan madhuryas fada matravishtatvat. Because of being absorbed in the sweetness of Bhagavan, my mind was not disturbed by all these things. Narad Muni's on a different platform altogether. We're on the platform where we have to develop faith that we don't yet have fully. We have some faith, but that faith has to be developed. And how is your faith going to be developed?
Association.
By challenges. By very good things which tempt you. That's a challenge, no? And by very bad things that scare you or hurt you. That's also a challenge. Any test you have to go through, it is understood by default. The only purpose that Krishna has behind it, and Krishna is always behind it. Nothing happens to a devotee by chance, or even just by karma. Krishna is always there. So his only purpose is to strengthen your faith, how to deepen your faith. So Prabhupada also says here, what else? To gain faith in God and strength of mind. You have to have a strong mind. If you have a weak mind, you cannot become Krishna conscious. And what is the third purpose, he says? Almost as an afterthought. Third purpose.
Preach.
Yes. To enlighten the inhabitants with the message of God. I mean, that is actually our primary purpose once we are devotees. But the first two benefits we have to get from these experiences is that we become pure devotees. We come to the platform of Narad Muni in which our minds also are absorbed very deeply in the sweet, only deeply and exclusively, only in the sweetness of relishing Bhagavan, his name, his fame, his form, his pastimes, his entourage, paraphernalia, etc. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada then goes on, he says, a sannyasi is duty-bound to take all these risks without fear. And then he gives the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As I told you, I saw this Jharikanda forest in which Mahaprabhu went. I don't know how he got through it, but we know that he did. And we know also that he was able to enlighten and enthuse even wild animals to chant the holy name. And then Srila Prabhupada points out about sannyas. Actually, sannyas is forbidden for ordinary men. If you're extraordinary, Prabhuji, you may want to stand up. If you're extraordinary, then you can take sannyas. Extraordinary men. This is the implication. One who changed, and then now he talks about the politicians. You know any politicians who are so-called sannyasis? We have one. We have one in UP right now. No need to mention names. I didn't mention his name. But one who changes his dress to make propaganda is a different man from the original ideal of sannyasi. Originally, sannyasa is meant for Bhagavan's pleasure. Nowadays, they use it for political purposes, just like fasting and other things they abuse as well. These things are tamasic, austerities. So one should, however, take the vow to stop social intercourse completely and devote life exclusively to the service of the Lord. That is real sannyas. If we read Bhagavad Gita carefully, especially in chapter 18, when Krishna asks Arjuna about this, we will see that this is his answer. You don't necessarily have to give up your mundane responsibilities, but you do have to give up the fruits of your action, and you have to devote yourself exclusively. Exclusive means you push everything out only to the service of the Lord. That is real sannyas. And then Prabhupada even adds that the change of dress is only a formality. Now, Lord Chaitanya did not accept the name of a sannyasi in this age of Kali. And Prabhupada says very clear instruction: sannyasis should not change their former names. Very interesting. We see a different convention adopted after Srila Prabhupada left this world, but generally Srila Prabhupada never changed any sannyasi's name as far as I'm aware. Anyway, in this age, devotional service of hearing and repeating the holy glories of the Lord is strongly recommended, and one who takes the vow of renunciation of family life need not imitate the Pravrajagacharya like Narad or Lord Chaitanya. In fact, you cannot imitate. You don't have the ability to imitate, what to speak of the privilege. Adhikar, we heard this morning. Adhikar means privilege, right? Where did we hear this? Yes, that's right. Please give me the privilege. What is the line? Seva adhikar, DJ. So, one may sit down at some holy place and devote his whole time and energy to hear and repeatedly chant the holy scriptures left by the great acharyas, like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Now this appears to be the opposite of what we also heard this morning, isn't it? What did we hear this morning about this? And Prabhupada was a letter, no? What did he say? Anybody remember? You're not listening. One should not sit down idly. One should work for... Yes, traveling and preaching. This is the point. So these two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They are compatible, actually, although they appear to be opposite. If by sitting down in Vrindavan, if one is preaching around the world, then that's perfectly acceptable. Just like Indra Prabhu, whose disappearance day was, what, yesterday? Day before. So, he's just sitting in Vrindavan. Hardly ever left Vrindavan. But look what he's done all over the world. He spread the holy name among an entire generation all over the world. You can't deny it. Like it or not. He did it. So, this is... Yes. So these are the things that Srila Prabhupada concludes in this purport on texts 12 and 13. We heard the other day that there are 4 verses discussing Nada Muni's travels, depending on how you break up these verses. In Sanskrit literature, verse numbers are completely arbitrary and they're not consistent ever. But so if we consider that these are 6 lines, these 2 verses are 6 lines apiece, that means there's an extra verse in there. Otherwise, text 14, tomorrow's verse, will be the final one about Nada Muni's travels, so we'll see what Srila Prabhupada says about that. All right, I'm going to stop here, but if anybody has any questions or any comments? Yes.
I was just wondering, this last point that you brought up, it seems kind of contradictory, to the verse, what we're reading this morning.
Yes.
And then even the start of the purport. I've also heard Srila Prabhupada say sannyas now is not like sannyas in the days of yore. So I'm wondering, what are the duties of a sannyasi now? And does it change throughout all of the ashrams, like Raja, Vyasa, Manapasta? When you read Bhagavatam, I understand it seems to be pretty high duties for these things. So.
Well, first of all, the duties of the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha are not the same as the duties of the sannyasi. That should be clear. And secondly, the sannyasi's duties are always the same. They are the duties that are described in the Shastras, especially Shrimad Bhagavatam and allied Vaishnava literatures. That doesn't change. How we apply these instructions, that might change under some circumstances. Some details may change. the reason when we're young and when we're neophyte in devotional service, the reason we feel confused by these apparent contradictions is because we cannot easily distinguish between what is an essential principle and what is a practical detail. People mix these up all the time, especially newer devotees. So, somebody who has a deep sense of, somebody who is wise on one hand, and somebody who also has a deep sense of the real essence of Krishna consciousness, that person will not be confused by apparently contradictory instructions. I remember one time, I think it was in Mumbai, one devotee came to Srila Prabhupada and said he wanted to get married. And Prabhupada told him to take sannyas. Another devotee came to take sannyas, and Prabhupada told him to get married. So, it seems, and the same servant was there. These two came like on the same day, just maybe a half an hour apart, and he was just confused by this. So, Krishna consciousness is such a thing that when we develop what Prabhupada calls faith in God and strength of mind, in the first or second sentence of the purport here, then we can see everything very clearly. What is what? When to act in this way, when to act in another way. These things become less disturbing. But aside from that, I'll just dilate on the fact that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he, by his example and also by his precept, he applied a very radical notion of sannyas. The traditional notion is that a sannyasi cannot wear shoes. And he certainly cannot cross the ocean. He cannot ride in a motor car or such things. He has to walk. That is the traditional notion of sannyas. And he innovated. For the purpose of preaching, these things are less important details. Sometimes we have to settle an apparent contradiction or a confusing point with reference to the tradition behind us. This is something that Manu explicitly endorses in his Manusmriti. When there's any doubt as to what is dharma and what is adharma, just do whatever your forefathers or your predecessors understood to be dharma. That's one thing. However, if the Acharya directly tells you, no, don't do that thing, do this thing instead, you have to do that thing. Mm-hmm. And particularly, this is called yukta vairagya. Renunciation that is proper does not ignore an opportunity to preach Krishna consciousness. And likewise, Srila Prabhupada brought Krishna consciousness out of India and applied it in a novel setting. And there are some standards, traditional standards, that Srila Prabhupada very clearly and deliberately and explicitly told us are not practical. In those cases, we can feel very confident about following his example because we've been instructed. If we've not been instructed, that's another matter. Then we have to consider, what is my adhikar? Do I actually have the prerogative, or as we said earlier, privilege, adhikar? The word adhikar, what does adhikar mean? The closest English word that I found, it's another one of these words that we don't have an English equivalent for, adhikara. Adhikara means prerogative. What does prerogative mean? It means something you're allowed to do, but why are you allowed to do it? You're allowed to do it because you're actually able to do it. This is the point. So, when we have the adhikar of an empowered preacher like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Prabhupada, then we have the adhikar to change the religious principles. In all other cases, we should be very cautious. We should be very cautious. Unless Srila Prabhupada has very clearly instructed us to follow some other standard that he has instituted, we should be very cautious. One of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, I believe it was Puri Maharaj, he was asked, why did the Gaudiya Math fail? I mean, they had the same instructions that ISKCON had, especially the instruction to form a GBC. And by the way, the Gaudiya Math actually did form a GBC, but it was too little too late. So, when asked why the Gaudiya Math failed, he immediately answered in one word. He said, Adhikara Ulanghana. That means they transgressed their adhikar. They overstepped the boundaries of their own prerogative. We have to be so careful of this. Throughout the history of ISKCON, actually, we can see case after case after case after case after case of problems that have been created by this tendency, which is the second cousin to the Sahajya tendency, which is to think that we're more advanced than we are and qualified maybe for things that are higher than we're qualified to enter into. So these are things that we have to consider very seriously. You want to say something?
I was thinking a wanted and good sign or result of following such an instruction, in this case, Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Srila Prabhupada, Yukta Vairagya, that those who follow him, they become enlivened or elevated in devotional service or gain faith and spiritual strength. Their ability to be brahmacharis and sannyasis, to be preachers, becomes stronger. Whereas if a spiritual master or leader say lessens or takes less emphasis over certain instructions, maybe in a sense, like not walking on shoes, not crossing the ocean, these are not such important things, but changing the words of the highly empowered acharyas to make things, in a sense, more easy, water it down, then we see that the followers aren't able to maintain renunciation. Brahmacharya ashram practically vanishes. And other very foreboding telltale signs.
Very good point. And also, Phalena parichiyate. You can determine if a person has been empowered by following the instructions of the spiritual master. Those instructions will always result in complete auspiciousness, pure devotional service, spreading of the Sankirtan movement. If it doesn't actually do that, then we see problems. Just like around the 1990s, one Gaudiya Math sannyasi became very popular among ISKCON devotees. And they were assuming that they were going for higher things, but we see, practically speaking, it never resulted in the spreading of Krishna consciousness. It only resulted in the exodus from ISKCON of so many devotees. So, and those devotees, even in their own sadachar, are lacking as well. In many cases, they're not, following all the principles that their own spiritual master taught them, Srila Prabhupada. So that's one example of this. It's a general tendency that we have to be very careful about. Guru Mukha Padmavakya Chitete Koriyaitya. Whatever the Guru says, we do that, and we don't. Arna Kari Homanayasha. This is the point. We don't divert to anything else. Just like a horse with blinders. After you accept the bona fide spiritual master, before you should be as critical as possible, but in a polite way, in a non-challenging way. You should be so discriminating before you accept a spiritual master. After you accept a spiritual master, horse with blinders, no questions. So, this is the point. Srila Prabhupada, singularly, out of all the members of the Gaudiya Math, Srila Prabhupada got this idea, and he applied this idea in his life. You can say, in a very real sense, that ISKCON is the manifestation of the impression that Srila Prabhupada had by dint of his good character from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the Vyavasayatmika Buddhi verse. because Srila Prabhupada saw. He's emphasizing so much. Even if I don't go back to Godhead, even if I do nothing, still I am a servant of my spiritual master. My only focus is whatever he told me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever his teachings in particular about hearing and chanting and becoming Krishna conscious. This is the duty of a disciple. Srila Prabhupada got that message, therefore Srila Prabhupada was effective. Srila Prabhupada found in at least one of his disciples a very worthy receptacle for the same message. That was Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he drilled this message into Tamal Krishna Goswami. And if you listen to Tamal Krishna Goswami's lectures, you can see, practically speaking, Tamal Krishna Goswami himself personified the very spirit of what is literally the last word of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru ityadi. That is the last verse of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. And he personified that spirit because Prabhupada drilled it into him. Once they went to the Gaudiya Math, there was some function, I think, maybe it was Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance day. And, obviously Srila Prabhupada was asked to speak, and so obviously Srila Prabhupada asked his disciples to speak. When Tamal Krishna Goswami got up to say something, Prabhupada nudged Sridhar Maharaj and told him, you listen closely to what this one says. Out of all of them, he's got it.
Whoa.
And needless to say, he spoke on this principle of Guru Nishtha. Because that's what he always did. that was him. So, this conservative spirit, it's an extension of this principle that we have to be so careful. Bandho mui sabadhana mate. In India, when you see the traffic signs, what does it say? Savadhan. Be careful. So, same. All right, anything else? Yes.
So, I have two questions. So, can a sannyasi, from what I understand in this purport, Prabhupada says sexual intercourse.
Social intercourse.
Social intercourse.
Makes a big difference.
So, social intercourse. Does this include the close associating with women, even for the sake of preaching, to the extent, like, for instance, hugging or... because for preaching, can we make people feel good? Because if you make people feel good, then they're open to the message.
Well, put it this way. One of my godbrothers told me that, let's just back up a little bit. About 20 or so years ago, somehow or other ISKCON started getting involved in this worldwide kirtan movement that went into the yoga studios. Actually, as the Sankirtan movement, ISKCON should have been spearheading that effort, but in fact the yoga community figured it out before we did, and they invited us to join rather late in the game. That's another matter. But there were some devotees, whom I won't name, who, they're somewhat popular singers in that circuit. And so they did a program in some multi-millionaire's house in, like, Beverly Hills or something. So my godbrother, Dravida Prabhu, a strict brahmachari, he was the only one of all the devotees who attended this program who had a shaved head and Vaishnava tilak and devotional dress saffron. He was the only one. All the others were kind of like, in their kind of half sort of. And, then because this program was in a wealthy man's house and there were many, many non-devotees taking part, and I think even the chief singer was also one of these popular yoga, kirtan people. So, at some point in this program, somebody started to pass around a chilam. The pipe for smoking hashish. And, it's going from one person to the next. Obviously, eventually it came to one of my godbrothers, not Dravida, but one of the others. And everybody's like, come on, let's go. Yeah, what's wrong with you? Don't be, this is the danger. Now, for the sake of preaching, should he have taken a long drag on that? The sannyasi, the injunction is very clear and very simple. Do not contact women intimately. I think you can categorize hugging a woman as something intimate for a sannyasi. Household, there may be something else, but even then you have to be careful. Why? Because even a wooden statue will agitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind.
Oh,
He said. Now one may think, okay, well that's for low-class people who can't control their minds and senses.
Yeah.
No. Vidvamsam apikarshati. Even a learned scholar becomes attracted. Vidvamsam apikarshati. Do not sit with your mother. Do not sit with your sister. Do not sit with your daughter in a lonely place. Is it clear?
yeah. Yeah.
So the question doesn't really need to be asked, does it?
No, I mean, this elaboration definitely helps.
All right. Another one?
The other question is, you were explaining about Radharani and Lakshmi Devi.
Yes.
So, now, the Sri Vaishnavas have a concept where they say that wherever Lakshmi Devi accepts the Lord as her husband, that is a full incarnation, and others are amsas,
Partial.
partial. And so Krishna is accepted because Satyabhama, the eight principal queens are considered expansions of Ashtalakshmi.
Yes.
And so they accepted.
They don't accept Radharani ultimately.
Right, Radharani and the Ashtagopis are not accepted as expansions of Lakshmi or any elaboration on this, because they consider Radharani and the Gopis as just fortunate jivas who Krishna
Oh, God.
gave mercy to. They don't have anything against them, but this is
Different acharyas have different views. And, we respect they're certainly a bona fide Vaishnava Sampradaya. We don't subscribe to their views. We follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have our own acharyas. What is the real difference? Whether you follow Ramanujacharya or whether you follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're both equally ancient traditions. They're both equally respected. So we have our acharyas, let them have their acharyas. We don't get in arguments. It's a good idea just to stress the commonality, recognize very clearly the difference within, not publicly. Srila Prabhupada, as we said yesterday, he wrote his books in such a way that even Sri Vaishnavas will also be enlivened. Although, when it has to be said, he will say it.
right.
So it's understood. He's a Gaudiya Vaishnava. We have a different position. But Srimati Radharani, there are some devotees, have you read Sridhar Srinivasa's books?
I proofread
Yeah,
several
so-
sections of it.
So, there are some devotees, Tamilian devotees, who, have researched these things in great length and try to find some points of reconciliation or something. Somebody told me that I am doubtful about this, but somebody said that Andal is actually an incarnation of Srimati Radharani.
Oh.
So, Andal I can understand as an incarnation of Lakshmi, but to say that she's non-different from Srimati Radharani, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. So anyway, we have our acharyas, we follow what they say, boss. And everybody, this is the standard approach that everyone will respect. If you follow your acharyas, even if I disagree with your acharya, it's not wrong for you to follow your acharya. You have to do that. Yeah.
Prabhupada is making this point in the purport that sannyasis' names aren't changed, but we see that Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada himself, changed some of his disciples' names
Yeah.
when he gave sannyas, and we see some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples,
And as I mentioned already, that this, as far as I know, this didn't happen before Prabhupada left in ISKCON. Prabhupada did not change the names, and Prabhupada very clearly says in this purport they should not change.
Bhakti Charaswami is Charlas or?
I don't remember actually. I think he was given all three initiations at once.
yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. But I don't know that Prabhupada ever changed anyone's name. I don't think he did. So, when you have a direct instruction from Srila Prabhupada in his books, you have to surrender to it. That's the right thing to do. There may be good reason that somebody does something else. I mean, I'm ready to hear it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's very clear what Prabhupada just said. In this age, the so-called sannyasis should not change their former names, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. It's a completely valid approach. It's the approach that Prabhupada took himself. It's the example he set, and it's what he says in his books. All right, should we stop? It's getting late.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hey,
Jai Mukunda Datta Prabhu ki
Ki Jai.
Lord Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.